Shalom. I'm Kirk Jowers, and I'm thrilled to be here with Dr. Hill. Dr. Hill, thanks for being with us to address our amazing wellness advocates in Israel.
Thank you, Kirk. I've been looking forward to this for a while, and so I'm really excited.
I am too. There are a lot of places I'd like to go, but at our virtual convention, you mentioned something that I had recalled from our first year together, but had kind of forgotten since then, that when you first heard of the essential oils, you were resistant. So I kind of just want to bear in on that for our short conversation today.
Go for the hard questions right up front. I see how this is going to go. Well, I don't know if resistant is the exact right word, but I think I probably express an opinion that maybe a lot of people do, and that is that this was something that was brand new for me. I didn't know a lot about it. I had at least one or two experiences with the oils, neither one of which were very favorable for me. And that was partly because I just didn't know what it was that I was supposed to do, and I had received no good counsel in that regard. So on my own accord, I tried to use an oil one day, and it just didn't work out well for me. So I had made a commitment at that time, actually, strangely enough, that I would never ever be involved with essential oils. But then, as fate a lot of times has it, we become really the product of our own experience.
Yeah.
And as a family, we had an experience that was a little bit challenging, and we found ourselves one more time with the opportunity to make a lot of changes, which included essential oils. And the outcome this time was extremely favorable.
So how did the essential oils re-enter your life after you had kind of decided maybe those aren't a necessary part of your life?
Well, it's kind of it's a little bit difficult to explain in its entirety, but our youngest child actually was not thriving, not doing well. Had actually received quite a serious diagnosis, and I felt for the first time that I need to do something different than what I would normally tell a patient or somebody who was seeking my counsel that way. And we began just this real intense look at what can we change as a family to help our son differently than what was being proposed to us. And in that process, I came back to my mind, and an opportunity presented itself to get reacquainted with the essential oils, to become involved with the essential oils, and we went full in. I saw it as not just a opportunity, but even in a financial sense. I saw it as an opportunity to provide something, and it really became more than that quite quickly. I began to realize, and we saw evidence of this in our own family initially, that the essential oils are really something that are powerful, are unique, and they can change outcomes for people. And for me, this was a driving factor. This was something that I wanted to not only be a part of, but was necessary. We felt like it was making a difference for us. And so we just became fully committed. And now here we are decades later.
Right.
And in fact, Kirk, this is a really good question, because I was just having this conversation with myself. Don't pretend like when you're driving, you don't talk to yourself either. I know we all do that probably in one way or another. But I was having this conversation with myself of how remarkable it is that now for all of these decades, I've never been disappointed in what I thought the essential oils could do, and the outcomes that we've experienced, and the outcomes that we fully anticipate other individuals are experiencing, and if not yet, they will experience. And for me, that's just become a very rewarding part of what has been now a career for me in looking at the essential oils.
Well, there's a lot of pearls in what you've just said. And you may or may not know, but especially when I first started, and I would always annoy you by peeking my head in the door and say, Doc, I just had this experience with this oil. Why did it work? I came from a university background among other backgrounds, and so I couldn't just rely on the anecdotes that I was hearing from wellness advocates and from others. I needed that, and you would always say, well, that's linalool, Kirk, and here's what linalool does. And so I go write it down. But a couple of pearls before I move on to the next question. One is I think, and this helps us understand a lot of doTERRA's culture, we decided to do, and I say we loosely, I joined 6 years after the company started, but doTERRA decided to be a direct selling company, I think perhaps partly because of what you said. You tried an oil, it didn't go as planned, and you didn't have anyone to really help you. I had you. I walked into your office basically every day for the first year and a half.
I'm glad you think that was a real advantage to you, because there may be some who don't feel that's an advantage at all. So
that's one pearl, and then the other pearl is for those who are sharing oils. It just doesn't happen the first time all the time. Sometimes people who become the most famous essential oil users on earth didn't like the oils at first because it's new, and we all like status quo. But then a need arose, you were open to them, and that's when it took.
Well, and that's how it really began to affect us personally. But you have struck on an interesting thought in my mind, and that is that this is really one of the reasons why we chose to do this the way that we have, is that there's really nothing that can measure to your own experience, but it takes time to gather that. It takes time for that to occur. And we all have individuals who we're close to, maybe whom we trust, and to draw on their experience as well is a really powerful tool for people.
Yeah.
I've appreciated that as we've gone through the experience of doTERRA now, as we've developed this company, there's a lot by way of culture. And one of the things that when people talk about the culture of doTERRA, I think you've embodied that really well with what you just pointed out. There's this expression of culture in doTERRA that says we're caring, that we're honest, that we have great integrity, that we're doing good. But there's another side to that culture, and that's the experience that people have. You know, some people are going to come to doTERRA and they're going to experience a financial freedom in their life. Some people will come to doTERRA and they're going to have an opportunity for service and caring for other people that they might not have been able to do before, not as completely as what they wanted to, at least. Maybe they have personal need or a family member that's driving them, like in my case, to want to make some changes and to do something different, to provide something different. And in the best case scenario, it's all of those things combined as a part of what doTERRA really is. So this was a conscious choice for us to present doTERRA in the way that we are.
Yeah.
But then also with that background of, but let's do it with integrity. Let's do it with meaning. Let's do it with purpose. Let's do it in such a way that people can graft into that for themselves and that it can become meaningful for them personally.
Absolutely. Let me jump back into your essential oil journey. And so you initially didn't have a great experience. Then you had a need. You started to use it. How did you start your learning process? You didn't have a doTERRA at that point, so you didn't have a team or wellness advocate example. You didn't have a Dr. Hill like I did to explain things to you. So how did you learn about the essential
oils? Well, this
oils?
was a really interesting time. Actually, if we look at the historical nature of essential oils, this was an interesting time in that progression. I remember hearing somebody speak to essential oils one time, and they were talking about how wonderful peppermint was, that it was so invigorating, and that the reason why that must be happening is because it was causing red blood cells to divide, and so therefore we were having more oxygenation throughout all the tissues in the body. Well, to the average individual, maybe that would make some sense, but to me, as a physician, that made zero sense because red blood cells don't divide.
Right.
And essential oils don't work outside of our body chemistry. They don't work outside of our body systems.
Yeah.
They work within them in a unique way and in a very profound way. And so my journey really kind of began that learning, which was taking what I already knew and what I already understood and trying to apply it differently, trying to get out of the normalcy of what was being said and just this sometimes really, what's the right, fabricated side of what was being said. If essential oils really are good,
Right.
And if they're working, there must be a reason why they're working. This is why I think, even though my journey began long before Doterra, Doterra is a progression of not just my journey, but for all of us here at Doterra.
Right.
And when we look at that, we now understand more. We do know how the essential oils are working. And we have an anticipated benefit that can come from the essential oils, and a meaningful one because of that. And so there's so much information that's now available for people. Even Doterra, we provide a great deal of information. We've changed the whole marketplace. We've changed the whole thought process around essential oils. And that really began with the very basics of let's define what an essential oil actually is.
Right.
Because there wasn't measurement for the differences that were occurring with that definition. So we actually defined scientifically, meaningfully what essential oils are, and then applied all of the sciences and the best that we know for research and progression of that. And now we sit in a place where those of you who are just now coming into Doterra are at a very different time because there is so much meaningful, good, concise, clear information right at your fingertips now in Doterra.
I love it. I just 5 minutes before this interview, I was talking to one of our Israeli leaders, and they already have close to 900 people signed up for our autumn tour today, and then well over 1,000 expected. That's exciting for a relatively newer market. Some of them have been working hard for a few years, so they probably don't like the newer market moniker. But what would you tell our friends in Israel then who are approaching people who are initially resistant to the essential oils, who maybe don't have the background? They're more like you the first time you found the oils.
Yeah. Well, there's probably a lot of different ways to answer that, Kirk. The most meaningful way that I think I could think of would be there's nothing that's more important than the experience that people have. Yeah. I'll share a quick story of my own. I had gotten involved with a hospital who had some inquiry about the essential oils. And for more than 2 years, I traveled out to this hospital and we met in boardrooms and we had all kinds of discussions about why we should and why we shouldn't incorporate essential oils into their hospital.
Yeah.
And we had been, as you can imagine, exploratory in every single avenue that we could, both from a regulatory environment and from what we thought the benefits of that would be in a patient care model and even in a staffing model at the hospital. And one day we're in this yet another meeting. It was very exhausting because I felt like for 2 years we've been having the same discussion. And the administrator over the facility, he had a terrible headache. And you knew that he did because he was furrowing his brow and he was rubbing his head. And I think he was outwardly expressing what I was feeling inwardly, that this, right. I don't know if this is really ever going to happen. And a nurse who was sitting right next to him said, "Do you have a headache?" And he said, "Yeah, a terrible headache." And he goes, "And I'm just going to excuse myself from the meeting." And she goes, "Well, I can take care of that." And she used an oil on him. And it was maybe no more than 5 minutes later, he called an abrupt halt to the meeting. And he said, "Is this what we've been talking about for the last 2 years?"
Right.
And I said, "Yes." And he said, "This is done. I want this in the hospital." He immediately formed a committee and we moved forward. So all of these boardroom discussions, all of ad nauseum talking about the regulatory environment and all the things that you can imagine would come up in those types of discussions, it was just that nurse giving him an oil, putting it on his temples, and him within just a few moments saying, "If this is what we're talking about," I think there's something to learn there.
Absolutely.
Nothing really is a better substitute. Look, sometimes I talk to people and I'm very expressive about all the details that maybe they want me to share,
right,
about their circumstance or their question. But there's really just no substitute for, even though there'll be people who many times are leery or maybe don't understand and maybe even sometimes quite critical, just use the essential oils. Give them an experience, and don't feel like even it has to be a powerful experience. How simple was that? And yet the outcome of that was magnified over and over again in the coming years as we continue to work with that hospital now, many years later. I whether that's an individual or that's an organization, it's always the same recipe. You know something that people really want to know and that they want to experience for themselves. And you should take advantage of your own experience in giving them that opportunity. Sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And that was certainly the case with me. And I would think that's probably been the case with most people. And so how grateful we are when somebody takes the time to just give us an experience and help us either with a circumstance or just understanding really what the essential oils are and what they could do.
Well, and that matches very quickly my experience as well. 2 years before I met you and Dave and some of the other founders, we had this group that gets together every year. Everyone who'd been at graduate school back in Boston, Cambridge area. And we had this woman who had become very into Doterra.
You can say it. You can say Harvard. It's okay.
Not all of them were from Harvard. But and at the end of this 1 week together, she gave us what she thought was a very meaningful gift. She gave each of us 2 bottles, but they were unmarked. And she said, one of these will just invigorate you. You'll be able to take on the day. 3:00, you're feeling sleepy, use this instead of something else. This other one will make you really restful, really sleepy. So we're like, thanks. And it meant a lot to her, so it meant something to us. But then we got home, and my wife, Chris, and I were kind of nervous because we couldn't remember which one was which. And I kind of had a belief because of her enthusiasm that these were powerful. Yeah. And so I was afraid I'd use the wrong one. I'd be sound asleep at work or, wide awake at 3 a.m. because I'd done the wrong one. So we ended up throwing those 2 bottles away because we didn't know. Fast forward to when we were with you and your wife, Chris, and Kristen had those issues with her back and very specific instructions on how to use it. We did. We had kind of wonderful experience, and we were in for life. But just that simple thing changed our course of history.
I just don't, one of the things that I've always loved about Doterra, Kirk, and you've experienced this too, and I know that everyone who's with us today is experiencing this in one way or another. There's just something profound about when, there's been a phrase that's been coined, we have an oil for that. And I chuckled at that at first. But you see people who enthusiastically approach that and say, wait, I have an oil for that. Yeah. And it's not a gimmick. It's genuinely, they feel I can make things different. My wife puts me on the spot all the time. We'll be at the grocery store or somewhere and she'll say, honey, that person's not feeling well. I can tell. Right. And I'm the person who's saying, yeah, well, I'm sure they're just fine, honey. Let's just get our groceries and let's go home. And she can't help herself. She's walk right over and there I'll be standing now with my wife in a line or 2 over. And then she'll call, yeah, honey, they need your help. And so she'll drag me over there. And there we are in the grocery store. There's no limits to this. And maybe that's the right way to look at it. Yeah. Is there a limit to the amount of good that we would want to do or the amount of good that we can participate in? I don't think that there is. I don't think that that's our nature is really to want to help and to do good. And the essential oils really provides a providence and a way for people to be able to do that with great outcomes.
Well, in the spirit of doing good, then, I want you to tell us what is your bedtime routine with the oils. And I'm saying only like the final 10 minutes. I don't want you going way back through the day. Last few minutes. All right.
Well, I do have a routine. One of the things that I always like is when we're diffusing essential oils. And I tend to not, I'm going to give a confession. I tend to not be as good at that as I want to be. And it's primarily because I'm this person who I'm going to be busy and doing something until, I got to go to bed. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to go right to sleep. It would surprise people to know that I always do lifelong vitality morning and night.
Before you go to bed?
Before I go to bed.
I don't do that.
I think this is kind of some of the uniqueness of where it comes from our own experience. For me, it helps me to actually rest more soundly, to sleep all night long.
I'm a lunchtime guy with that.
I do it first thing in the morning, and I do it last thing at night. And then there's a few oils that I always like to use. Frankincense is one that I turn to as I'm winding up my day.
Right.
And Copaiba is another one that we talk a lot about Copaiba and all of its value, but one of its primary benefits is also focused on the immune system, which, of course, is how the body heals and protects itself. And it's most active at night, more active at night than it is at any other time. And so I'm sure to take Copaiba in the evening too. I'll tell you my best nighttime experience, though, if I've had a particularly difficult day, and this gets into everything that we've been talking about again, not something I tend to do for myself as much, but I really have this sense that my wife really cares about me when I'll just be drifting off a little bit, and she's putting some oils on my feet, and her go-to oil for that is lavender, and there's just something so peaceful about that for me.
Yeah.
Not only do I feel greatly loved and cared for, but it's just such a personal experience when I'm just woken up just a little bit. You're kind of in that in-between state.
Right.
And my wife will just be smiling at me and putting some oils on my feet. Then I know that I've really done something right that day.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. My 10 minutes, I wash my face, and then, and I alternate between our two.
Oh, I didn't know we were going to. Well, I brushed my teeth and everything
with
too,
On
Kurt.
Guard. All right.
I
I brush my teeth. I guess you don't, but that's okay.
Yeah, I only brush my teeth and bathe on Saturdays. That I didn't think was important outside.
It's true. So you got the On Guard toothpaste. I do that. I'll actually alternate between the two, our two lines of skincare, kind of every other night. Not that systematic, but I have them both and kind of alternate. And then when I get in bed, I put in Serenity and frankincense in the diffuser every night, and now actually the humidifier, which I really love. And then I have a pack of 4 Touch right by my bed, which again is frankincense, On Guard, lavender, and neroli.
Really?
Yeah. And I rolled those 4 on the bottom of my feet, and I'm out.
So you told me the last 10 minutes. So if we get that sounds like more than a 10-minute routine
10
to me. No.
minutes.
Well, you must be working super fast.
I'm quick.
What I find for myself is some people may have heard my response to that question and say, well, he doesn't use very much of the oil. But you got to keep in mind that there's a summation that's happened all throughout the day, and
Right.
I'm pretty routine with the oils all throughout the day too, which is something I like to encourage people to do. We sometimes react and respond out of I have an acute need for something. Something's happened. I'm trying to respond to it, and that's perfectly fine. But there's this whole other side of what do we do to help our body to be resilient? What do we do to fortify ourselves? What do we do to make ourselves be a little more adaptive to the environment that we're in? So throughout the day, what are we doing as well? So I do a lot of diffusion throughout the day.
Yes.
I'm not quite as good at it in the evening as you are, but my wife is. But I do those kinds of things throughout the day too. So I think the key here is that while we might have some set routines throughout the day, or even at the end of the day, it's getting into a habit.
Yeah.
Learning how the essential oils are really going to affect us and benefit us, and what it is that our needs are, and don't be afraid to react and respond to that. One of the things I love about some of what you said was you captured some of the fastest ways to receive the benefit from the essential oils, like a diffusion model, for example.
Yeah.
Or just applying the oils on the bottom of the feet. There's a number of different ways. So don't be afraid to use them consistently. That's when I absolutely feel at my very best, is when I just go throughout my day reacting and not only to the circumstances, but be sure that I'm pulling in those set routines of things that fortify me on a daily basis. So lifelong vitality is one. Turmeric, the duo cap for me, and turmeric essential oil is one. Copaiba is one for me. Frankincense is one for me. Citrus oils is another one for me. I'm becoming a big fan of yarrow palm and starting to use that more and more and more as I've defined how I think I need to use it based on my own personal needs.
No, I use that mostly. I'll dot that all over my face. I think because I saw Emily do it on an Instagram post at some point. So
I've given up. I'm never going to look as beautiful as Emily. I have my own reasons for using it, and it's not my beauty complex. But I think that's kind of the point, right? Yeah. We just, those are the things that I turn to every day, and then I fill in the gaps where I need to. And I love that about the essential oils. We get to personalize where we feel like our needs are, and we can react and respond to them. And another caution I would give to people, Kirk, is don't feel like you have to do everything that, well, I heard Kirk Jowers say he does this, so I know everybody wants to do what you do, but they don't need to. And not even what I'm doing does everybody need to do. Find out what works for you.
I remember you told me early on you didn't love lavender in the diffuser at night. You loved cedarwood. That was, at the time, your go-to. I know those sometimes routines change, but I got way into cedarwood for a while after that.
Yeah, you're just going to find what works best for you.
Yeah. So we have two questions from our Israeli friends. One is, what makes Doterra so unique among the aromatherapy industry? We've touched on a lot of it, but
we've kind of been around the surrounding issues with that, but just as a reminder, we are different. We do stand unique, and we stand alone in so many of the things that we portray about the essential oils. It's been interesting to see that over the years, as our knowledge has increased, as our research has increased, as the sciences have been applied, initially sometimes there's things that we share that people are in great criticism of, but over time as they get borne out, look, we never make statements in Doterra that are arbitrary or that are not well thought out and that we can't back up scientifically. We've done all the hard work before we say something in Doterra. And it's been gratifying to see how the industry has followed in our path as we've brought some symmetry, we've made sense of the essential oils. It's very flattering, but it's also really challenging. So there has to be some other things that set us apart and make us different, other than just the knowledge that we have and the science that we create and how we're continually forming the industry. The other things that we do is we decided a long time ago that quality was a distinguishing factor of essential oils. This is always such a hard thing to talk about in a meaningful way, because everybody's going to say, yeah, our oils are perfect too. That's the common belief. And I encourage people, I encourage people to devour everything that we put out in this regard. And as you know, we're becoming more aggressive about that and showcasing some of that and giving people purview into what quality actually means and the steps that we take. And when people look at that, I believe that they'll have a real good sense that we do it differently.
Yeah.
We are a standalone in that area. It's not just about which essential oil you use, it's about the quality of the oil too.
Yeah.
And quality and benefits go hand in hand. We're also greatly concerned about safety. And so these are things that we take very seriously.
I'll never forget on the safety part. We were traveling once together, and because I was in my new loving essential oil stage and just loving it, you saw me just using a lot of oils. And I think you said something like, Kirk, you do know those are not single-use bottles.
You could use that bottle more than once if you wanted to.
Yeah, and you kind of explained dosage and everything. I thought that's pretty cool, because obviously there would be, as an owner of the company, using the more oils the better, but I've heard you from stage and on videos always talk about dosage. Safety is so important, and even in my personal experience, you've said, no, let's do a couple of drops there. You may want to use touch if you like to, if you really
want to use more.
like to roll so much on your feet, then, maybe go touch
Well, those are some subtleties that exist within the company, but they're things that we take very seriously. We have, it's one of the areas that I'm fortunate enough to be participating in the company and have some responsibility for. And I take it seriously. Somebody asked me a question one time about the essential oils, and although I didn't respond to them this way, as they asked their question, the thought popped into my mind, because I use them on my family too.
Right.
I'm concerned about those things because we have the same needs that everyone else does. But then I think there's another element that makes Doterra a little bit different, makes us a standalone, and some of that we've talked about already. It's the culture of Doterra. When we started the company, this was a framework that wasn't built around a clever idea or let's just figure out something we can do and we'll transition or we'll do something else later. We really had this belief that essential oils are meaningful to people. And because of that, we also felt like we had a real responsibility to be honest, to have integrity, and to position it in such a way that it would make sense to people.
Yeah.
That means that we have to expose essential oils for what they really are. And that's why so much of the time we've been contrary to popular opinion.
Right.
It's because, and I've said this many, many times. I'm almost embarrassed that I say this as much as I do, but one of my favorite things to say is, you don't know what we know. Yeah. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I mean that with some excitement, with some tenor for, and that means that we're applying things, we're developing things, we're sharing things. And in the end, it means people can just have great confidence. I remember an experience I had with somebody who said, well, you just want me to take your word for all of that. If you need to at first, yes, I do. I would prefer that you believe what I'm telling you.
Right.
If that's where your experience is right now, then lean on me for a little bit if you need to. But I also have this firm belief, and our experience has been, and you've seen this too, Kirk, it's actually fun to watch people when they come into Doterra, the change that they go through.
Yeah.
Because whatever tendency they had, or even whatever enthusiasm they had in the very beginning, as they work through that and they begin to partition that for their own needs, they end up with an experience that, no, Doterra has its own meaning for me personally.
Right.
And I would welcome anybody to challenge what I'm saying by having their own experience in Doterra, because I think they're going to find that it is very different. It's not like other companies, not only in its context and in what we talk about and even what we're trying to accomplish, but in what we're doing with the essential oils and the actual oils themselves. I just don't know how you could ever find anything of greater value than you can right in Doterra.
Well, and I've got to say two things on that. One, again, especially in my first year when I was such a new pup trying to learn things, but also with some responsibilities in the company, including, representing us for external relations, for government, so or media that are maybe wondering about the company. And so, I would go in and say, what about this? And, you would pull up, you've got massive books about chemistry, plant chemistry, essential oils, everything. And you'd open it up and you'd help me learn the way I need to learn. You took me to the, to the lab once and you showed me how that all worked. You showed me how the testing goes. And then, of course, that's me. And there's a reason to educate me because I've got to do a job for Doterra. But I'll never forget our first meeting that I attended, and I was used to, doing presidential campaigns, and you protect, the main person, and you were the main person in this case, and whether it was me or the staff, it was to get that person out of that line, to
get him out.
And I
remember said what they needed to say. Now get him out.
And it was late, and I was tired. I was ready to go have you and me go get a little bite to eat and go to bed. We got something else the very next day. And you had this line, and so I thought I was doing you a great favor. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, I know you're going to hate this, but I've got to take you away. And you're like, no, I can't go yet. I need to meet all these people. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Hill. I know you'd love to, but we've got to go. And
I remember that.
You kind of grab me and say, Kirk, I'm going to talk to every one of these people. I'm like, oh, because I'd never had that before. I've been with a lot of, people who are the headliner of whatever event. And everyone was always eager for the out. And so I am sorry that you're not going to be with our amazing friends in Israel today, because I know you would love them.
Not yet, but I'm sure at some point we'll have that chance.
Yes.
I've loved that my entire career, the opportunity just to, I in a way, sure, it takes a lot of time and it can be exhausting because I do want to talk to every person. But you hear so many wonderful things, and you hear sometimes your heart aches for people and you desperately want to help them. And I hope that people look to not just me, but I think Doterra as a whole. You mentioned earlier that there's several people there who have been working for months and months and months and
years and years.
Years and years preparing for where we are right now. What a great resource for people who are coming into Doterra. And this is part of that culture that we talked about. We're doing good. We're helping people. And I just don't know of anything that's really much better than that. Sometimes you feel like I have to do a meeting to get to where I really want to be, which is now I get to talk to them.
Right.
Now I get to answer their questions. Now I get to hear their stories. And, you walk away feeling edified. You walk away feeling uplifted and like you've done something meaningful. And that's a powerful thing. It's what continues to drive us. And Kirk, I'm going to turn the tables here just a little bit because I've watched you carefully now for a lot of years. And when you first came to us here at Doterra, I remember thinking to myself, why is that guy wanting to come to Doterra? But I want to express some appreciation for all that you've done personally in Doterra. Because I know you have carried a heavy load for us, right? In the regulatory world and in the government world, you've really done a lot of wonderful things for us. And you've helped us to not only become better, but you've also helped us to change things and to change perspective and outcomes. And that's been really powerful. But I think that there's probably a lot of people who join with me, and you have a real passion for what we're doing as well. And we're appreciative of that. And I'm confident that everyone who's here with us today has probably felt that in one way or another. And if not, you will, because I'm going to tell you that now is probably me going to Kirk and going, Kirk, we really probably got to go. I don't have anybody left in my line. And you're still talking with people. And it's a great quality that you have, Kirk. And I just wanted to tell you thank you. Thank you for representing that, but for really just bringing more to Doterra and making us more than what we were.
Well, thank you so much. I've been to Israel a few times in my life, but not since I've joined Doterra. So I'm hoping that's post-COVID.
Maybe we'll get to go there together. That
our
would
experience
even be better.
Together.
Yeah.
It's the most miraculous place on earth. The history, the largest faiths on earth, most important historical faiths on earth have such important origins there. It's incredible. So I can't wait to be there. I've met with them at different conventions that they've come to, both here and in parts of Europe and Russia. But yeah, we both need to get to Israel as soon as this crazy world allows it.
I would like that.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, for being with us, and thank you, everyone in Israel, for being with us today. And shalom.
Shalom, everyone. And can I just say one final thing?
Of course.
We're really sorry we're not there with you in person, and we're hoping that we can be at some point. But I would feel remiss if I didn't just not only express my own gratitude for all of your efforts. We have a great deal of excitement that we're holding for you right now, because this is an exciting time. You've been working for this for a long period of time. But that doesn't just come from me. That comes on behalf of myself and all of my partners, and in fact, all of us here at Doterra, all of the teams that work and are doing their good part to try to make this happen. So we're all grateful, and I'd be remiss if I didn't express that gratitude on behalf of everyone here at Doterra. So
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Kirk, and hope to see you all soon.
Thanks.